Ora, good morning, fellow South Africans and citizens of the world. Now, this is a shout out to Tony. Tony, thank you so much for showing me this video, or the link to this video. What it is basically is an expat South African who's now moved to Australia, and basically saying how crazy the politics in Australia is, that they are bringing in the worst possible people and leaving out the best possible people, which is the South African whites who work very hard. And we do have a very interesting situation in Australia, and it could work very much in our favour. And this is just, we have an election coming up this year, and we have two Mickey Mouse leaders in the Labour Party and the Coalition, which are the two major parties in South Africa. Neither really knows what the hell they're doing. And we have a real hothead, redhead female, Pauline Hanson from One Nation Party. And the interesting thing is that the guy who was once Prime Minister of Australia a few years ago, Latham is his name, has left the Labour Party and has joined the One Nation Party, which is seen like by the mainstream media, unsurprisingly, as a radical right-wing party. Now, without question, if One Nation get the balance of power in the federal parliament, they will be leaning towards bringing in people who have the same cultural values as the average white Australian, which falls straight into the basket of white South Africans. So if these Mickey Mouse parties, the two major parties, lose a lot of their votes and One Nation hopefully gets a lot of seats, this could be the best possible thing for South Africans wanting to move to Australia. So let's hope that happens. The video that's attached, you'll hear this now Australian expressing complete frustration about the way Australia is currently going. Anyway, look, I'll let you listen to the video. It's very, very interesting. It's a completely different perspective, but one that will help you to get your head around what people in Australia are thinking. Take care, have a great evening, or great morning, I should say, and please remember to subscribe to be kept informed. Bye for now.
Some days you wake up in the middle of the night and think that you have something to say, something to contribute to humanity. And today I'd like to this has happened to me. I woke up at 3 in the morning and came to work and decided to sit at my computer and say something, try to contribute to the current state of affairs with a bit of what I hope to be enlightenment due to my own life experience. What actually brought me to this today was the plight of the white South African farmers in South Africa. To give you a notion of my background, I was born in Angola when it was a Portuguese colony. In the 60s, my parents moved from Angola to Mozambique when I was 7 for a few months. Then we moved to Rhodesia for a few years. We were there for about 4.5 years. Then we moved to Botswana for another few years. Then back to Portugal. Then I came back to South Africa in 1988, thinking that South Africa was still a beacon of light on the African continent and would remain so. Because in those days, South Africa on its own had 75% of the production or industrial output of the entire African continent. That's one country. It fed 17 countries around it, well, north of it, and was also 85% of the entire African economy. So I thought, well, a powerhouse like that, there's a future there, and I moved back to South Africa until Mr. F.W. de Klerk decided to hold a referendum, in which they asked for permission from the white South African community to negotiate the future of South Africa with the ANC. and that was when Mr. Mandela was let out of jail, and that was the beginning of the end for South Africa. Beginning of the end because after one man, one vote, we've just seen the decline of South Africa, which is going. I mean, South Africa maintained itself reasonably well while Mandela was in power. He pretty much was a man of his word, even which I thought was probably not right or wouldn't happen. But yeah, maybe because he was an educated man. He was a lawyer. He was actually an intelligent individual, but then he was replaced by Oliver Tambo, who was just an ignorant buffoon. After Mr. Oliver Tambo, we got Mr. Sisulu, not Sisulu, what was this guy that just got kicked out? Whatever, it doesn't matter, just another name. And now we're getting Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa, who back in the days of the demonstrations against whites and whatnot was one of the worst firebrands. He'll even put Mr. Mugabe to shame as far as anti-white radicalism goes. So South Africa has been replacing moderate leaders with ever less and less moderate individuals, and this is definitely going the way of Zimbabwe. My advice to white people is get out while you still can. There's no future for you there. The blacks have made it abundantly clear you're not welcome. So you know what? Leave while you've still got something on your body and while you're still alive and breathing. It's not worth it. My parents and I, we've lived in a few different countries. We've left under different circumstances. We've started our lives from zero all over again. And you know what? It's not that hard. Just lock your door, buy your tickets, get the heck out of there while you still have your families alive. Go back to Europe, go wherever you've got family around the world. Just go, just leave them to their own devices because that's what they need. They have to learn the hard way that politics and mumbo jumbo doesn't feed their children, doesn't quite cut it. Black nationalism, black racism. You can't call it racism because reverse racism apparently doesn't exist. Well, it does. It's just racism. Reverse or not, racism is racism in whatever color you want to put it. And one thing that black people refuse to acknowledge is how racist they are. Because we call them black tribes back in Africa. And tribal wars have existed since forever. But no, that's not racism. Them wiping each other out. Zulus against Xhosas, Xhosas against Zulus, and the Matabeles against the Mashonas, etc. As we saw Mugabe wiping out Joshua Nkomo's people back in the 70s and the 80s, and especially the 80s with that Korean brigade that he had. No, that's not racism. That's, what is it? Some people have a goal when they come up with all of these political definitions. Anyway, what actually is happening in Africa is racism, and what we have is communism run by black dictator would be and de facto dictators. Redistributing the wealth of the people, not with the people, of course, they never do that, but amongst themselves and their cronies. That's what happened in Zimbabwe. Mr. Mugabe he's another Mobutu, he's a billionaire with all that he's stolen of the country. His generals are rich, no different from China. China, if you go and check who the real millionaires are, it's all the people in the Politburo, the generals. The generals' families. Then that's the civilian part of things. But in effect, the riches of China are distributed amongst the Politburo, not so much amongst the people. Although there is a growing civilian prosperity, thank goodness, away from Mao's madness. There's still massive state control, and obviously the Politburo, the army, and all those people, they're still pretty much the ones who are running the show. Private property in China is still pretty much the generals and the Politburo own most of it, and everybody else gets the scraps. The model basically still exists throughout Africa. Most African countries are run by dictators. Once they get in power, they don't want to get out. South Africa is still, for now, been going on as a sort of democracy of sorts, because the ANC obviously has been winning the elections time after time after time, and the people are just too dumb, too stupid to see that they are never going to get out of this morass, because the ANC has no solutions for the country, only for its politicians. Anyway, my message to Australians in this case is, based on mistakes that I saw committed by the white government in South Africa back in the 70s, you people are pretty much going to bury yourselves the same way that white South Africans buried themselves in the 70s. And what I'm talking about is the following. When Angola and Mozambique became independent in 1975, and the civil wars started because the blacks turned on each other along tribal political lines, both in Angola and Mozambique. The whites had to flee, and they fled to South Africa because Southwest Africa, Namibia, and to South Africa because those were the closest borders that they had. And the white South African government at the time took in the educated, you had to have at least standard 5 to be able to qualify to remain in South Africa in those days. Anybody with less school qualifications than that were just put into airplanes and shipped off back to Portugal. Now, what the South African government failed to see in those days was that the people who had built up Angola and Mozambique were exactly those with Standard 4, Standard 3, the so-called uneducated. They were the tradies, they were the entrepreneurs who actually built up Angola and Mozambique to a level that rivaled South Africa back in those days. And so the cream of the crop, the workers, the ones who really, rolled up their sleeves and built Angola and Mozambique, were shipped off back to Portugal because they were deemed not good enough for South Africa. And the ones who were the high school students, the little yuppies, the useless lot, they were the ones who were kept behind to stay on in South Africa because they had school qualifications. They didn't have other qualifications. They didn't know how to work. They didn't know much. But those were the ones that were kept. Now, Australia is heading exactly down the same road. You may open the doors to white farmers, white South African farmers. Very good. We whites who have come to this country, like myself, I came into this country 12 years ago with 350 euros in my pocket, a suitcase, 2 pairs of shoes, 6 sets of clothes, some work instruments, a couple of professional books in my suitcase, and a work contract. And I've been a university lecturer. I've worked for somebody else, and I'm now self-employed, and I employ, actually in my business, we are now 5 people. So I haven't been on the dole. I have now, after 12 years, taken advantage of a couple of government grants to help the business go up. All the money that I've gotten from the Australian government has been pumped into this business to bring it up and to be able to employ more people. So I'm not on the dole. I'm not a Muslim who brings in 4 wives and has 4 or 5 kids with each to try and bankrupt the Centrelink. I'm a working person. I don't believe in being a leech. So now the problem that that Australia seems to have is it seems to be ashamed of its own heritage. Now, this country is a majority Western value country. What you need to be doing is bringing in people who assimilate, people who want to help build up this country, people who have built a similar country to Australia. Because let me tell you, you go to South Africa, everything you see there was white brains. It wasn't black brains. The only thing they're going to do is, once the whites pull out, is take the country down the same road as Zimbabwe, Angola, Mozambique, and every other post-independence country that we've seen to date. Africa has been gradually turned into a dust bowl by communism, which only likes to share prosperity amongst the leaders, not with the people. The only thing it distributes is poverty. And you Australian politicians don't seem to learn from other people's mistakes. But you know what? You're cutting off the branch that you're sitting on as well. You're doing exactly the same thing that the white South Africans did. They did not help others that would have helped them, and in doing that, they only paved the way for their own demise. And you here in Australia are doing exactly the same thing. If you have a golden chance to bring in a great majority of people who are hardworking, who've built a beautiful nation, every bit as beautiful as Australia. And I'm grateful to be in Australia. Don't take me wrong. But your arrogance, your short-sightedness is going to cost you this country the same way it cost us South Africa back in the day. So, listen to the left wing, to Labour, listen to the Greenies who don't want to help you. You only want to bring in terrorists and criminals and war criminals and genocidal maniacs from foreign cultures, because anything to be multicultural. Well, democracy is going to be your own undoing, because allowing people like the Greens to turn this country and our society inside out, well, it's going to cost you, including the Greens and including the Labour, the same way it's happened in South Africa, because the South African left, they said, no, there's going to be a great brotherhood of man. It's all going to work. It's going to be, it's going to be just right. Communism always works. Socialism always works. Yeah, for the polities, not for everybody else. Everybody else gets down in the food stamp queues like they do in Venezuela. My message to you, Australian, is open your eyes, get off your butts, get these sad politicians that you have elected to actually do the right thing and bring in people with the same values that you have, hardworking people who will bring up the economy of this nation as they brought up and kept the economy of their nation running, because the South African economy is kept up by the whites. The whites are now, 2 or 3 million they are left. And they're the ones who are actually supporting 30 million blacks. Because when South African whites leave, that country is going to become every bit of dust bowl as everything else around it. So, you know what? You want to help yourselves? Help those who deserve it and those who need it. That's my message to Australians. Have a good day.
Ek hoor nie ek